Why are there children at my table? Charles Whitmore's voice cut across the dining room like a slap, sharp and cold enough to make the crystal shake. The black maid standing at the head of the long cherry table froze, the serving spoon still in her gloved hand, oatmeal dripping back into the bowl. 4 kids sat there, small and stiff, in high-backed chairs, their feet not even touching the floor, all of them dressed in light blue shirts that punched straight through his chest, because that was the color his son Noah always wore in the photos on the wall. The house was dressed for mourning, black ribbon on the staircase, a single white candle burning by the window for the 1-year memorial of Noah's death. And Charles had planned to spend the day in silence, not sharing his table with strangers. "Mr. Whitmore, I can explain," the maid whispered, her name tag catching the chandelier light. Maya, in tiny gold letters, her brown hands shaking as she set the bowl down. "You brought children into my house, on this day of all days, and you put them at my table in his shirts." Charles stepped closer, each slow step echoing in the huge room, his anger pushed forward by the pain he refused to touch. The oldest boy scooted closer to Maya, his jaw tight, while the little ones gripped their spoons with white knuckles and stared down at their food like it might save them. "They're just hungry, sir," Maya said, her voice thin but steady. "The staff kitchen is closed for the service, and we had nowhere else to sit." Charles's eyes burned as they swept over the careful plates, the folded napkins, the clean collars, the exact blue of Noah's favorite shirt, and the grief he had locked away rose up like fire and turned into rage. "You dressed them like my son," Charles said, but this time his voice was low, rough, as if the words were cutting him from the inside out. Maya blinked, confused, and looked at the kids' shirts, as if seeing the color for the first time, then back at him with wide, scared eyes. "These are their school uniforms, sir. Light blue is the school color." "I swear I didn't. Do not lie to me," he snapped, his hand slamming down on the table so hard one of the water glasses jumped. The youngest girl flinched and grabbed the baby boy's hand, and the tiny sound of their chairs creaking under their weight made the whole room feel wrong, like the house itself was holding its breath. "You think I don't know what today is?" Charles went on, his chest tight, his hands shaking now. "You think you can turn my grief into some kind of story, parade these kids in front of me like they belong here?" "We didn't come to hurt you," Maya said, taking off her yellow dish gloves, laying them carefully on the sideboard like she was trying to show she meant no harm. "Please, sir, just let them finish breakfast. Then we'll leave before the guests arrive." "No," he said, grabbing the glass vase of white lilies that his late wife had loved so much, the ones he had ordered for the memorial. "You will take those shirts off them, or you will all get out of my house right now." Maya stepped forward, hand raised. "Sir, please don't." But the anger inside him snapped, and his arm flew before his mind could catch up, the vase smashing from his hand, exploding into a shower of glass that cut across the floor and up her arm. The sound of breaking crystal hung in the air, sharp as a scream, and a red line opened on Maya's dark skin where a long shard had slashed through her sleeve. She gasped and fell back against the chair, her free hand grabbing her arm as blood soaked into the white of her apron. And she still said, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm so sorry," like she was the one who had thrown it. "Don't hurt my mom," the oldest boy shouted, jumping up from his chair with a speed that startled even Charles, the boy's small body planting itself between them like a shield. "I wasn't going to touch her," Charles snapped, but his hand, still hot from anger, pushed out on reflex, catching the boy's shoulder and shoving him sideways. The child crashed into the chair and tumbled to the floor with a hard thud and a choked sound that hit Charles straight in the ribs, because for one split second, it was Noah he saw there, 12 years old and wild with anger, standing between him and a teacher long ago saying, "You don't get to talk to my mom like that." The younger kids started to cry, their soft sobs filling the big room, spoons pushed aside, oatmeal going cold, while Maya dropped to her knees beside the boy, her hurt arm forgotten. "Malik, baby, are you okay?" she asked, her voice shaking now as she cupped his cheek, checking for bruises, the cut on her arm still leaking red. "I'm fine," the boy said, but his eyes were bright with tears, and he turned his head to glare up at Charles with a look that was far too old for his small face. "Get them out," Charles said, his anger suddenly tasting bitter in his mouth, his throat dry. "Now, are you the man who lived with my dad?" the boy asked, and the question dropped into the room so heavy that even the candle by the window seemed to flicker. Charles stared down at him, his brows pulling tight. "What did you just say?" Malik pushed himself to his feet, shaking a little but still standing between Maya and the billionaire like it was his job. "That boy in the pictures in the hall," he said, jabbing his thumb toward the doorway. "He looks like my dad when he was younger." Maya sucked in a breath. "Malik, don't," she whispered, but it was too late. The words were already out, hanging there. "How do you know about those pictures?" Charles demanded, his voice turning sharp again, but there was fear under it now. "Because Dad told us," Malik answered, swallowing hard. "He told us stories about this house, about a man who took him in and then pushed him out when he didn't act the way he wanted." Before Charles could speak, the doorbell rang, the sound echoing down the marble hall like a judge's hammer. It rang again, sharper this time, and the house that had been dead quiet for a year suddenly felt like it was waking up. "Stay here," Charles said, though he didn't know if he was talking to them or to himself. And he walked out, his steps slow, his heart beating too fast. In the hallway, Noah's framed photos watched him from the walls. Every one of them the same light blue shirt, the same half smile, the same eyes that used to beg him to listen. At the front door, a young courier in a winter jacket shifted from foot to foot, holding a thick cream envelope like it was more than just paper. "Mr. Whitmore," he asked, checking a small tablet. "I need your signature." Charles signed his name with a hand that did not feel like his own, his fingers numb, his breath short. And then the courier added, "Sender paid extra, said you had to read it today." "Who sent it?" Charles asked, but the man only shook his head. "No return name, sir. Just this note." He flipped the envelope so Charles could see the back, where in a hand that punched straight into his memory were two small words, "From Noah." The door closed on its own weight, the soft thud sounding louder than all his shouting from before. And Charles leaned against it for a second, his eyes closed. The envelope pressed to his chest like it might disappear if he let go. He told himself it had to be some cruel trick, some lie from a lawyer or a reporter, or one of those people who loved to feed on pain. But his fingers had already started to tear the flap, and part of him, the part that still lit a candle for his son, needed to know. When he walked back into the dining room, the kids had not touched their food. Maya had tied a dish towel around her arm, but blood still showed through, and her eyes were glassy, from pain and shame she did not deserve. "Sir," she asked, looking at the envelope, and there was something like fear and hope twisted together on her face. "Explain," he said, his voice low now, tired more than angry. "What is this?" Maya's shoulders rose and fell as she took a slow breath, and when she spoke, her words were small but steady. "Before he passed, Noah gave me a letter," she said. "He told me to bring the kids here on the first anniversary of his death, and to give this to you if I ever found the courage." Charles felt anger flare again. "You planned this?" he asked. "You brought strangers into my home to ambush me with the past." "They are not strangers to him," she said, looking at the four faces turned up toward them, each holding a different kind of fear. "Please, just read it before you decide what we are." The oldest girl sniffed and wiped her nose with the back of her hand, and the baby boy, Jaden, hiccuped a sob and leaned his head against Maya's side, careful of her hurt arm. Charles looked at them, really looked now, and though their skin was a rich brown instead of his pale tone, he saw little echoes that made his stomach twist. The way Malik held his jaw just like Noah did when he was trying not to cry. The same small crease between the girl's brows that Noah had when he solved puzzles. Even the way the baby clung to his mother like love was the only safe thing. His thumb traced the edge of the paper, and finally he unfolded the pages, his eyes catching on the first line that hit harder than any punch. Dad, if you are reading this, it means I'm gone, and you finally saw the people I was most scared to show you. The room blurred for a second, but he blinked hard and kept going. The letter was written in Noah's messy print, the loops of each word tight and rushed, like he had too much to say and not enough time. I know you hate surprises, it said, so let me start plain. The 4 kids at your table are mine. Malik, Zoe, Ella, and Jaden. My whole heart times 4. I should have told you when I first met Maya at the hospital, but every time I tried, I saw the way you looked at people, the way you talked about real family and real blood, and I got scared. Charles's throat tightened, and he could almost hear his son's voice reading the lines. You used to say I was chosen, not born, like it was a gift and a debt at the same time. After Mom died, it felt like the debt got bigger every day. I was always trying to earn my place, to earn your name. When I fell in love with Maya, I told myself you would see what I saw. But then I heard your words in my head, about class and image and what people would say. About a black maid and your adopted son with 4 kids that weren't your real grandkids. So I hid them from you, and that is my shame, not theirs. Charles's eyes burned now, and he had to stop and press his fist against his mouth for a second, the pages shaking in his hand. I'm not writing to ask for money. The next part read, only for mercy. If I go before you, please don't leave them in the dark just because they don't share your blood. Remember what you told me when you signed my papers. Family is a choice. If you ever meant that, choose them now. The room seemed to tilt as Charles lowered the letter, the words hanging in the air between him and the children, who were suddenly not strangers at all, but the last pieces of a son he had never really known. Maya's eyes were shiny with tears she had held back since morning, and she stood as if she might take the kids and run if he raised his voice again. Why didn't he tell me? Charles asked, but the question was more to himself than to her, and his voice shook in a way that made Malik's shoulders drop just a little. He tried, Maya said softly, more than once. He even practiced in front of a mirror one night, saying, Dad, these are my kids, and this is the woman I love. But he said every time he pictured your face. The words died in his throat. Charles looked down at the broken glass on the floor, the thin line of red on Maya's arm, the fading bruise already starting on Malik's shoulder, and a sick wave of shame rolled through him. I hurt you, he said quietly, the truth heavier than any anger. I hurt your son, he added to Malik, and the boy's dark eyes locked on his. Yes, Malik said, not cruel, just honest, like someone who had seen too much too young. But my dad used to say people can mess up big and still decide to do better. The candle by the window flickered, as if the whole house were listening, and for the first time that morning, Charles's voice lost its hard edge. Sit back down, he said, nodding toward the chairs. All of you, please. They moved slowly, like animals that had been chased one too many times. But they did what he asked, their small frames sinking into the tall chairs again. Charles picked his way around the glass and reached for the phone on the sideboard with hands that still shook. But not from anger now. You need a doctor, he told Maya. I know one who lives close. He can come here. No hospital, no questions. She frowned in confusion. Sir, that's not necessary. It's just a cut. I've had worse, she said. But he was already dialing. The words, I caused it, stuck in his throat like a stone. When he hung up, he turned back to the kids. I'm sorry I scared you, he said, forcing himself to meet each pair of eyes. No one should ever yell at you for being hungry or for wearing the wrong shirt. Zoe, The middle girl with bright eyes sniffed and asked in a tiny voice, "Are we in trouble?" The question made his chest ache. "No," he said, and he meant it with everything in him. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I did." As they slowly started to eat again, spoons scraping soft against bowls, the house sounded different. Less like a museum and more like something alive, even with the pain still hanging in the air. Later, when the doctor had stitched Maya's arm and left strict orders for rest, Charles stood by Noah's biggest portrait in the hall, the one from his college years. "You were braver than me," he murmured to the painted smile, thinking of the hidden family, the secret love, the letter that asked him to be the man he claimed to be. The memorial service that noon in the small stone chapel on the edge of the estate felt different from what Charles had planned, because this time he did not walk in alone. The guests turned and stared when they saw him come down the center aisle with Maya at his side, and 4 children in neat blue shirts holding hands between them. The picture of a story no one there had been told. Some faces tightened in quiet judgment, some widened in surprise, and a few softened with quick, knowing respect. But for once, Charles did not care what any of them thought. He led his new small line to the front pew, the one he and Alina had always used, and when Maya tried to slip into a back row, he touched her good arm lightly and shook his head. "Here," he said, his voice gentle. "Family sits up front." During the pastor's words about loss and memory, Charles's mind drifted to the letter in his coat pocket, the one that had burned his skin since he folded it there. When the pastor asked if anyone wanted to speak, the chapel stayed still for a long beat, eyes sliding away, people clearing their throats, until Charles felt something rise in him that was stronger than his fear. He stood, walked slowly to the front, and turned to face the rows of people who thought they knew his life. "My son Noah did not carry my blood," he began, his voice tight but clear, "but he carried my name, and I made him pay for it every day after my wife died." A murmur rolled through the crowd, but he pressed on. "He loved a woman I did not know, and raised 4 children I never met, because he was afraid I would see them as less. Today, I want you to know he was wrong about one thing. They are not less. They are my grandchildren, by his choice, and now by mine." The words hung in the air, like a bridge being built in front of everyone, and Charles felt his knees almost buckle with the weight of saying them out loud. "If you came here today, claiming to love Noah," he added, scanning the faces, "then you will honor them, too, and you will learn their names, not just whisper about their skin or their mother's job." When he sat back down, Malik stared up at him with wide eyes that looked so much like Noah's had when he was 10 that for a second, the years between them disappeared. "You said we're your grandkids," Malik whispered, as if afraid the words might vanish if he said them too loud. "If you'll have me," Charles replied, and this time it was his voice that shook. After the service, while people lined up with careful hugs and soft lies about how beautiful the speech was, Maya tried to pull the kids away to catch the staff shuttle back to the city, but Charles stopped her near the chapel steps. "Come back to the house," he said, "all of you. There's no sense sending you out in the cold when we have more rooms than we know what to do with." She studied his face, searching for pity or pride, but saw only a tired man trying very hard to stand up straight. "I don't want charity," she said quietly. "Good," he answered. "I'm not offering any. I'm offering what your letter asked me for." Her fingers tightened on Jaden's small hand. "Responsibility?" she asked, and he nodded once. The word heavy and right between them. In the days that followed, the giant, echoing house that had once held only dust and old memories began to change shape around the 4 small lives, now running through its halls. At breakfast, Charles learned how Malik liked his eggs, and that Zoe hummed when she was happy, and that Ella did not like syrup touching her bacon. And he found himself laughing once, real and sharp, when Jaden asked if billionaires were allowed to burn toast. Later, when the kids explored and found Noah's old room at the end of the West Hall. Charles stood in the doorway with Maya, both of them quiet as they took in the frozen space. The trophies, the books, the faded poster on the wall. I haven't opened this door since he left for college, Charles admitted, voice soft. I thought if I kept it the same, I could pretend we hadn't said the things we said. Maya moved to the desk, her good arms still wrapped in white bandage, and picked up a notebook. Inside were half-finished letters, all starting with Dad, and all scratched out halfway through. He wanted to tell you so many times, she said, showing Charles one page where Noah had written, I know you think blood is everything, but I need you to see that love is bigger. And then crossed it out so hard, the paper almost tore. Charles sat on the edge of the bed that had been empty for so long and put his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking once, twice. I was adopted, too, he said suddenly, the truth tumbling out before he could stop it. Alina and I could never have children by blood, and I swore when we chose Noah that he would never feel like a second choice. Somehow, I turned my own fear into the very thing that hurt him. Maya sat beside him, careful not to crowd him, and for a moment they both looked around the room like they were searching for the boy who was gone and the man he had become. We can't fix what he lived through, she said softly, but we can decide what his kids live through. Charles wiped his face with the back of his hand and stood, a new kind of resolve settling into his shoulders. The guest rooms on the second floor are big and empty, he said, almost to himself. They should not be sleeping across town in a tiny apartment when this house has more space than we could ever use. When he told the kids that night they could each pick a bedroom, Malik tried to act calm, but his eyes sparkled. Zoe squealed and asked if she could paint her walls sky blue. Ella asked where she could put a bookshelf, and Jaden simply crawled onto Charles's lap and fell asleep mid-story. I don't want them to feel like visitors, Maya reminded him later, standing at the kitchen sink. Visitors can be sent away when the mood changes. Charles shook his head. They are not visitors, he said. I am putting their names in my will, and tomorrow I will call my lawyer to add their college funds to the trust. She opened her mouth to argue, but he lifted a hand. Not because you need my money, he added, holding her gaze, because they deserve the same safety I once promised their father and then failed to give him. Weeks passed, and the world outside the iron gates began to whisper and buzz as news slowly leaked that the hard, distant billionaire had 4 black grandchildren now living under his roof. A few old friends called with fake concern that was really nosy judgment, hinting about reputation and how fast people talk. Some board members of his company asked quiet questions about distractions, and one cousin even sent an email asking if he had proof the kids were really Noah's. Charles read the messages one by one, then dragged them all into the trash without answering, his jaw set, his heart clearer than it had ever been. At home, the noise felt far away. The kids ran in the yard, their winter coats open, their breath puffing in white clouds, while Charles and Maya watched from the back steps, with mugs of hot cocoa warming their hands. Do you ever regret bringing that envelope inside? Maya asked at last, her eyes on the children. Charles thought of the broken vase, the bruise on Malik's shoulder, the long, angry years when he had chosen pride over peace. And then he looked at the boy racing across the lawn, laughing, at the girls making up a song as they built a crooked snowman, at the baby boy who now called him Grandpa without fear. Every regret I have is about the years before it came, he said quietly, not the day I opened it. One crisp Saturday morning, they all gathered in the front yard to plant a young oak tree, right where the old flower bed used to be. Each child placed something in the hole, a puzzle piece from Noah's old set, a ribbon, a drawing, a tiny toy Quran. Charles added a small framed photo of Noah smiling in his light blue shirt. Together they covered the roots with earth, their hands dirty, their breaths coming out in soft clouds of effort and hope. When the tree was steady, Charles wiped his hands on his coat and stepped back. the winter sun low and bright behind the bare branches. "Does this mean we stay forever?" Zoe asked, hugging herself against the cold, her hair wild around her face. The question held more than just curiosity. It carried every move from one tiny rental to another. Every time a job ended, and the future shifted under their feet. Every for now that had never turned into for good. Maya looked at Charles, her eyes full of warning and wish at the same time, and for once, he did not hesitate. "Yes," he said simply. "As long as you want this to be home, it is home." Malak's eyes filled, but he blinked the tears back, nodding like he was sealing a deal in his own heart, while Ella slipped her small hand into Maya's and whispered, "We have a tree and a table now. That means it's real." That night, the long cherry dining table that had once sat empty was full at last, covered in simple food and loud stories, kids laughing with their mouths full, Maya leaning back in her chair with a tired, happy smile, and Charles at the head, not as a judge or a king, but as a man finally learning how to stay. He looked around at the faces, lit by the soft glow of the chandelier, at the light blue shirts and the brown hands passing bread, and the scar on Maya's arm that had healed into a thin white line, and he knew the truth that had shaken him had also saved him. He had spent years chasing a perfect family made of his own ideas and rules, only to find out that the real thing had walked into his house, wearing scuffed shoes and school uniforms, and asking only for breakfast and a place to belong. As he raised his glass of water and said, "To Noah, who gave us to each other," he understood at last that family is not the blood you guard, but the love you choose, again and again.